T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, main engine start, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia to broaden our view of the universe through the Hubble Space Telescope.
Hi everybody, this is Paul Vogelsang, host of the Not Old Better Show. As many of you know, the Not Old Better Show has a wonderful partnership with the Smithsonian Associates program to feature their programs, their experts, their authors, the world leaders, and many others who are invited by the Smithsonian to share their experiences and expertise. You've just heard the launch of the space shuttle STS-125. On board was Mike Massimino. Last Thursday night, I was thrilled to be included by the Smithsonian at the reception and book signing for author, astronaut, engineer, and professor Mike Massimino. Mike Massimino has written a new book, Spaceman, an astronaut's unlikely journey to unlock the secrets of the universe. First, the book review, and then we'll hear a story right from Mike about his work spacewalking and repairing the Hubble. But the review of the book, again, Spaceman, an astronaut's unlikely journey to unlock the secrets of the universe. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to find yourself strapped to a giant rocket that's about to go from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour? Or to look back on the Earth from outer space and see the surprisingly precise line between day and night? Or to stand in front of the Hubble telescope wondering if the emergency repair you're about to make will inadvertently ruin humankind's chance to unlock the universe's secrets? Mike Massimino has been there, and in the book Spaceman, he puts you inside the suit with all the zip and buoyancy of life in microgravity. Massimino's childhood space dreams were born the day Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. But his journey to realizing those dreams was as unlikely as it is captivating. Growing up in a working-class Long Island family, Massimino catapulted himself to Columbia and then MIT, only to flunk his qualifying exams and be rejected twice by NASA before making it to the final round of astronaut selection, where he was told his poor eyesight meant he'd never make the cut. It took him 4 times. But even that couldn't stop him from finally earning his wings, making the jump to training in T-38 Air Force jets and preparing his body and soul for the journey to the cosmos, taking us through the surreal wonder and beauty of his first spacewalk, the tragedy of losing friends in the Columbia shuttle accident, and the development of his enduring love for the Hubble telescope, which he'd be tasked with saving on his final mission. And we'll hear from Mike in just a second that particular story. But Massimino's book was written as really an ode to never giving up and the power of teamwork to make anything possible. Spaceman invites us into a rare, wonderful world where the nerdiest science meets the most thrilling adventure and pulls back a curtain on what having the right stuff really means. I love this book. It was one of those books I read in about a day. I think you'll enjoy it too. So now I want to return to the event, though, at the Smithsonian with Mike Massimino. You've heard me talk a little bit about attending these Smithsonian Associates events. They're fantastic. They're open to anyone. You just go register on the website, smithsonianassociates.org. We'll have a link, of course, in our show notes. And you get to meet there at these lecture series firsthand some of the most phenomenal people, many of whom have accomplished something worthy of a Smithsonian exhibit. So attending gives you this behind-the-scenes glimpse into the genesis of their activity. You learn about the people firsthand with ample Q&A. You get your books signed and any other items that you want signed. But seeing face-to-face these extraordinary people really has an impact. And certainly last Thursday night, I met and listened to Mike Massimino tell his wonderful, heartfelt story with a sense of humor. Again, the title of the excellent book, I've just read it, couldn't put it down, it's fantastic, is Spaceman, an astronaut's unlikely journey to unlock the secrets of the universe. And while space travel, the Hubble Telescope, science, and NASA are front and center in this book, so if you are an astro nerd, you'll love it. It certainly drew me in immediately, but I think what's even more compelling is Mike, the person. Who he is in all of this otherworldly activity. Turns out, he's quite a person. A family man, deeply touched by his unique experience, which, of course, as I say, almost didn't happen. Took him 4 tries to make it. He first applied in 1989.
And I was told no.
Then, in 1991.
No, again, a second time.
And in 1994, Mike made it to the interview round.
And then you go back and wait, and I was told no.
Finally, in 1996, he was accepted. So this is a story of perseverance. It's a story of accomplishment, success, and how much those around us support, drive, and help us during our achievements. Mike is humble. He's funny. He has a wonderful way of describing the emotion that he felt while in space and how he felt while there 350 miles away from Earth. I spoke to Mike briefly. Hopefully we're going to get another opportunity to go into some detail with Mike about this time in his life and the book specifically. But Mike explained a little bit to me his goodbye moment with Hubble and what was on his mind and the mind of others as the crew headed up to the telescope.
And he said, make sure the last time on that telescope you give it a pat for me. And so I'm going to give it a pat for Ron and for everyone else that's worked on this great machine over the years. So I hope that's going to be in my mind as I'm letting go of the telescope for the last time. Just give my one last handshake with it.
As Mike points out, again with great humility, only a handful are selected by NASA. And so getting to space is something the rest of us do through someone else's eyes. Mike Massimino is the person I want telling me about the beauty, the awe, wonderment, and exploration. Mike's book is excellent in this way. I encourage all our not old, better audience to read it. You'll love it. While at the event, as I say, I was able to record a bit of Mike's talk, and with permission, I'll play a brief, funny, but representational anecdote Mike told about what he and the crew of astronauts did to repair and upgrade the Hubble Space Telescope, conducting 5 spacewalks during their mission to extend the life of the orbiting observatory. They successfully installed 2 new instruments and repaired 2 others, bringing them back to life, replaced gyroscopes and batteries, and added new thermal insulation panels to protect the orbiting observatory. The result is 6 working complementary science instruments with capabilities beyond what was available and an extended operational lifespan. You'll hear about the repair mission and Mike's role repairing the Hubble Space Telescope, spacewalking and orbiting Earth at over 17,000 miles an hour. Enjoy. And remember, check out the Smithsonian Associates program at smithsonianassociates.org.
In 1984, I was a senior in college, and I went to see the movie The Right Stuff. And a couple things really struck me in that movie. The first was the views out the window of John Glenn's spaceship. The view of the Earth, how beautiful it was on the big screen. I wanted to see that view. And secondly, the camaraderie between the original 7 astronauts depicted in that movie. How they were good friends, how they stuck up for each other, how they would never let each other down. I wanted to be part of an organization like that. And it rekindled a boyhood dream that I had kind of gone dormant over the years. And that dream was to grow up to be an astronaut. And I just could not ignore this dream. I had to pursue it. So I decided I wanted to go to graduate school, and I was lucky enough to get accepted to MIT. And I went up to MIT with the intention of following this dream of space flight. And while I was at MIT, I started applying to NASA to become an astronaut. And I filled out my application, and I received a letter that said they weren't quite interested. So I waited a couple of years, and I was graduating from MIT, and I sent in another application a second time a few years later, and they sent me back pretty much the same letter. So I applied a third time, and this time I got an interview, so they got to know who I was, and then they told me no. So I applied a fourth time. And on April 22nd, 1996, I knew the call was coming, good or bad. And I pick up the phone, and it's Dave Leitsma, the head of flight crew operations at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And I say hello, and he says, "Hey, Mike, this is Dave Leitsma. How you doing this morning?" And I said, "I really don't know, Dave. You're going to have to tell me." And he said, "Well, I think you're going to be pretty good after this phone call because we want to make you an astronaut." 13 years after that, it's May 17, 2009, and I'm on Space Shuttle Atlantis, about to go out and do a spacewalk on the Hubble Space Telescope. And our task that day was to repair an instrument that had failed. And this instrument was used by scientists to detect the atmospheres of far-off planets. Planets in other solar systems could be analyzed using this spectrograph to see if we might find a planet that was Earth-like or a planet that could support life. And just when they got good at doing this, the power supply on this instrument failed. It blew. It wasn't working. So the instrument could no longer be used. And there was no way really to replace this unit or to repair the instrument, because when they launched this thing and they got it ready for spaceflight, they really buttoned it up. They didn't want anybody to screw with this thing, whether you were on the ground or whether you were in space. It was buttoned up with a access panel that blocked the power supply that had failed. And this access panel had 117 small screws with washers. And just to play it safe, they put glue on the screw threads so they would never come apart. You know, it could withstand a space launch, and there's no way we could get in to fix this thing. But we really wanted this capability back. So we started working, and for 5 years we designed the spacewalk, and we designed over 100 new space tools to be used. Great taxpayer expense. Millions of dollars, thousands of people worked on this. And my buddy, Mike Good, who we call Bueno, he and I were going to go out to do the spacewalk. I was going to be the guy actually doing the repair. And inside was my friend Drew Feustel, one of my best friends. He was inside. He's going to read me the checklist. And we had practiced for years and years for this. And they built us our own practice instrument and gave us our own set of tools so we could practice in our office, in our free time, during lunch, after work, on the weekends. We became like one mind. He would say it, I would do it. We had our own language. And now's the day to go out and do this task. The thing I was most worried about leaving the airlock that day was my path to get to the telescope, because it was along the side of the space shuttle. And if you kind of look over the edge of the shuttle, it's kind of like looking over a cliff at that point, with 350 miles to go down to the planet. And there were no good handrails. When we're spacewalking, I like to grab onto things in our space gloves and be nice and steady. But I got to this one area along the side of the shuttle, and there were no good handrails to grab. I had to grab like a wire or a hose or a knob or a screw. And I'm kind of a big goon, and when there's no gravity, you can get a lot of momentum built up, and I could go spinning off into space. And I knew I had a safety tether that would probably hold, but I also had a heart that I wasn't so sure about. So I knew they would get me back. I just wasn't sure what they would get back on the end of the tether when they reeled me in. So I was really concerned about this. And I took my time, and I got through the treacherous path and out to the telescope. And the first thing I had to do was to pull off or remove a handrail from the telescope that was blocking the access panel. And there were 2 screws on the top, and they came off easily. And there was 1 screw on the bottom right, and that came out easily. And the 4th screw is not moving. And my tool is moving, but the screw is not. And I look close, and I realize it's stripped. And I realize that that handrail's not coming off, which means I can't get to the access panel with these 117 screws that I've been worrying about for 5 years. Which means I can't get to the power supply that failed. Which means we're not going to be able to fix this instrument today. Which means all these smart scientists can't find life on other planets. And I'm to blame for this. And I could see what they would be saying in the science books of the future. This was going to be my legacy. I realized this. That my children and my grandchildren would read in their classrooms. We would know if there was life on other planets. But Gabby and Daniel's dad, my children would suffer from this. Gabby and Daniel's dad broke the Hubble Space Telescope, and we'll never know. And through this nightmare that had just begun, I look at my buddy, Bueno, next to me in his spacesuit, and he's looking at me like, don't look at me. Bueno was a rookie, and his job was to basically hand me tools. This was my job to fix this thing. And then I turn and look into the cabin where my 5 astronaut friends, my crewmates are in there, and I realize nobody in there has got a spacesuit. They can't come out here and help me. And then I actually looked at the Earth. I looked at our planet, and I thought, there are billions of people down there. But there's no way I'm going to get a house call on this one. They cannot, no one can help me. And I felt this deep loneliness. And it wasn't just a Saturday afternoon with a book alone. I felt detached from the Earth. I felt that I was by myself, and everything that I knew and loved and that made me feel comfortable was far away. And then it started getting dark and cold, because we traveled 17,500 miles an hour. 90 minutes is 1 lap around the Earth. So it's 45 minutes of sunlight and 45 minutes of darkness. And when you enter the darkness, it is not just darkness, it's the darkest black I have ever experienced. It's like the absence of light, and it gets cold. And I could feel that coldness, and I could sense the darkness coming. That's where we were going to enter. And it just added to my loneliness. And for the next hour or so, we tried all kinds of things. I was going up and down the space shuttle, trying to figure out where I needed to go to get the next tool they wanted me to get to try to fix this problem, and nothing was working. And then they called up, after about an hour and 10 or 15 minutes of this, they said they wanted me to go to the front of the shuttle to a toolbox and get vice grips and tape. And I thought to myself, we are running out of ideas. I didn't even know we had tape on board. I'm going to be the first astronaut to use tape in space during a spacewalk. But I followed directions. So I get to the front of the space shuttle, and I open up the toolbox, and there's the tape. And at that point, I was very close to the front of the orbiter, right by the cabin window. And I knew that my best pal was in there trying to help me out. And I could not stand to even think of looking at him, because I felt so bad about the way this day was going, the way it turned out. Not like what we had thought about, but all the work he and I had put in. And I couldn't even stand to even think of looking up at him. But I realized that he's actually, through the corner of my eye, through my helmet, just aside there, I can kind of see that he's trying to get my attention. And I look up at him like this, and he's, a little bit above me in the window, and he's just cracking up smiling and giving me the okay sign. And I'm like, is there another spacewalk going on out here? And I really can't talk to him, because if I say anything, the ground will hear. Houston will hear, the control center will hear. So I'm kind of like playing charades with him. I'm like, what are you, nuts? And I expect him, I didn't want to look, because I thought what he was going to do, instead of giving me the okay sign, I thought he was going to give me the finger. Because, I'm thinking he's going to go down in the history book with me. But he's saying, no, we're okay. You just hang in there a little bit longer. We're going to make it through this. We're in this together. You're doing great. Just hang in there. And if there was ever a time in my life that I needed a friend, it was at that moment. And there was my buddy, just like I saw in that movie, the camaraderie of those guys sticking together. And I didn't believe him at all. I figured we were out of luck. But I said, at least if I'm going down with my best pal. And as I turned to make my way back over the treacherous path one more time, Houston called up and told us what they had in mind. They wanted me to use that tape to take the bottom of the handrail and then see if I could yank it off the telescope. And he said it was going to take about 60 pounds of force for me to do that. And Drew answers the call and he goes, 60 pounds of force. And they call me Mass. It's short for my last name. He goes, Mass, I think you got that in you. What do you think? And I'm like, you bet, Drew. Let's go get this thing. And I get back to the telescope and I put my hand on that handrail and the ground calls again. And they go, well, Drew, you guys are okay to do this, but right now we don't have any downlink from Mike's helmet camera. I got these cameras mounted on my helmet so they can see everything I'm doing. It's kind of like your mom looking over your shoulder when you're doing your homework, And they go, we don't have any downlink for another 3 minutes, but we know we're running late on time here, so if you have to. And I'm saying, let's do it now while they can't watch. Because the reason I'm taping this thing is if any debris gets loose, they're going to get all worried and it's going to be another hour. We'll never fix this thing. We've been through enough already. So I'm like, let's do it now while Mom and Dad aren't home. Let's have the party. So I'm like, Drew, I think we should do it now. And Drew's like, go. And bam, that thing comes right off. And I pull out my power tool, and now I've got that access panel with those 117 little bitty screws with their washers and glue, and I'm ready to get each one of them. And I pull the trigger on my power tool, and nothing happens. And I look, and I see that the battery is dead. And I turn my head to look at Bueno, who's in his spacesuit again, looking at me like, what else can happen today? And I said, Drew, the battery's dead in this thing. I'm going to go back to the airlock, and I'm going to swap out the battery. And I'm going to recharge my oxygen tank, because by all this moving around, I was getting low on oxygen. I needed to get a refill. And he said, go. And I'm going back over that shuttle, and I noticed two things. One was that treacherous path that I was so scaredy cat sissy pants about going over, it wasn't scary anymore. That in the course of those couple hours of fighting this problem, I had gone up and down that thing about 20 times. And my fear had gone away because there was no time to be a scaredy cat. It was time to get the job done. And what we were doing was more important than me being worried. And it was actually kind of fun going across that little jungle gym that I had back and forth over the shuttle. And the other thing I noticed is that I could feel the warmth of the sun. We were about to come into a day pass. And the light in space, when you're in the sunlight, is the brightest, whitest, purest light I have ever experienced. And it brings with it warmth. And I could feel that coming. And I actually started feeling optimistic. And sure enough, the rest of the spacewalk went well. We got all those screws out, new power supply, buttoned it up. They tried it. They turned it on from the ground. It all was working. The power supply was working. The instrument had come back to life. And at the end of that spacewalk, after about 8 hours, I'm inside the airlock getting things ready for Bueno and I to come back inside. And my commander says, hey, Mass, you've got about 15 minutes before Bueno's going to be ready to come in. Why don't you go outside of the airlock and enjoy the view? So I go outside, and I take my tether, and I clip it on a handrail, and I let go, and I just look. And the Earth, from our altitude at Hubble, we're 350 miles up. We can see the curvature. We can see the roundness of our home planet. And it's the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. It's like looking into heaven. It's like paradise. And I thought to myself, this is the view that I imagined in that movie theater all those years ago. And as I looked at the Earth, I also noticed that I could turn my head, and I could see the moon, and I could see the stars, and I could see the Milky Way galaxy, and I could see our universe. And I could turn back, and I could see our beautiful planet. And at that moment, it changed my relationship with the Earth. Because for me, the Earth was always kind of a safe haven, where I could go to work or be in my home or take my kids to school. But I realized it really wasn't that. It really is its own spaceship. And I had always been a space traveler. And all of us here today, even tonight, we're on this spaceship Earth amongst all the chaos of the universe, whipping around the sun and around the Milky Way galaxy. A few days later, we get back. Our families come to meet us at the airfield. and I'm driving home to my house with my wife and my kids in the back seat. And she starts telling me of what she was going through during that Sunday that I was spacewalking, and how she could tell, watching the NASA television channel, how sad I was, that she detected a sadness in my voice that she had never heard from me before. And it worried her until she heard me say, "For the love of Pete." And once she heard that, she knew everything was going to be okay. It's a line from Little Rascals. Anyway, so I thought, hey, I wish I would have known that when I was up there, because this loneliness that I felt, really, Carol was thinking about me the whole time. And we turned the corner to come down our block, and I could see my neighbors were outside, and they decorated my house, and there's American flags everywhere. And my neighbor across the street is holding a pepperoni pizza and a 6-pack of beer. Two things that, unfortunately, we still cannot get in space. And I get out of the car, and they're all hugging me. I'm still in my blue flight suit, and they're hugging me and saying how happy they are to have me back, and how great everything turned out. And I realized, my friends, man, they were thinking about me the whole time. They were with me, too. The next day, we have a return ceremony. We make these speeches. These engineers who had worked all these years with us, our trainers, the people that worked in the control center, they start telling me how they were running around crazy while I was out there in my little nightmare all alone, how they got the solution from the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, and how that team that was working on that Sunday figured out what to do, and they checked it out, and they radioed it up to us. And I realized that at the time where I felt so lonely, that I felt detached from everyone else, literally, like I was away from the planet, that really I never was alone. That my family and my friends and the people I worked with, the people that I loved and the people that cared about me, they were with me every step of the way. Thank you.
Thanks to all my guests today, all the help on the podcast, and especially to Media, Studio Edit, and the great work by Wayne Brown and his team for editing the podcast and making me sound so much better. That is to say, not old, but better. Thanks to all.